Everywhere I look lately, someone is talking about lifestyle change. It's become the new buzzword of the wellness space, especially around GLP-1s. The phrase sounds gentle, evolved, like we finally outgrown diets. But the more I listen, the more I realize we're still trying to sort out what it actually means. Some people say you don't need to track anything on a GLP-1. They insist that the medication does all the work and that bringing awareness to food or movement, it pulls you back into diet culture. Others argue that if you're not tracking, you're wasting the opportunity to build structure. It's confusing because both sides, they sound confident. And for anyone trying to build peace around food, the noise can be loud enough to drown out their own instincts. What I've noticed is that both extremes are reacting to the same wound. One group is still carrying the fear of losing control, the need to measure, monitor, and manage every variable. The other group, they're exhausted by that control and they want nothing to do with it. Most people on GLP-1s, they live somewhere in between those poles. We want to heal our relationship with food without pretending that awareness is the enemy. The problem is, our culture doesn't have much practice in living in that middle space. Diet culture taught us that success requires strictness. Anti diet culture, in trying to correct that harm, sometimes swings so far that any form of intentionality gets labeled as obsession. So we end up caught up between rigidity and avoidance, wondering which version of freedom we're supposed to choose. When I started on Zepbound, I remember how quiet my hunger became. It was like someone turned the volume knob down on a radio that had been blaring for years. But that silence didn't automatically make my habits healthy. It just gave me room to see what had always been underneath: the emotional eating, the reward loops, the way stress used to drive every craving. The medication opened a door, but I still had to walk through it. That's where lifestyle work really begins, in the space that the medication creates. It's not about fighting your body anymore. It's about learning to listen. And listening sometimes means tracking for awareness. It means checking in, not checking boxes. The narrative that tracking equals diet culture misses the nuance. The intention behind the action is what matters. Writing down what you eat because you're curious about your energy, that's not the same thing as logging every bite because you're afraid of losing progress. Both look similar from the outside, but they feel completely different from the inside. I think people are scared of slipping back into old habits of obsession, and that fear is valid. But avoidance, it doesn't heal obsession. It just hides it. The work isn't to reject every tool that reminds you of dieting. It's to rebuild your relationship with those tools so they no longer hold power over you. There are days where I still notice that old diet voice whispering, saying things like, you should track every day. You should tighten things up. And then there are days where the newer voice chimes in. You shouldn't track at all. You're supposed to be intuitive. Both voices, they come from fear: the fear of losing control and the fear of being controlled. But neither voice sounds like peace. Peace lives in the middle. It sounds like self trust. It's the quiet confidence that you can use structure when it serves you and let it go when it doesn't, that you can be intentional without being obsessive. For a long time, I thought peace would feel like indifference, that one day I'd stop caring about food or movement altogether. But indifference, that's not peace. It's disconnection. Peace is when you care without the panic. It's when you can engage with your choices from a place of curiosity, not judgment. That's why I think lifestyle change is less about discipline and more about honesty. Not performative honesty, the kind we post online, but the quiet kind that happens when you're just sitting with yourself. When you notice how your energy dips after skipping breakfast. When you realize walking clears your head more than scrolling does. When you start making decisions because they feel supportive, not because someone told you they're allowed. Those are the moments that shape a sustainable relationship with food and health. And for people on GLP-1s, those moments are crucial because the medication gives you an opportunity that most diets never did: a pause, a chance to rewrite the way you relate to hunger, satisfaction, and effort. But if you spend that pause arguing about whether tracking is morally right or wrong, you miss the point. The point is to get to know yourself again without noise, without shame, and without the old scripts. Social media hasn't made that any easier. Every day there's a new take, a new reel declaring what you should or shouldn't do on a GLP-1. One person says, just eat when you're hungry. Another says, you still need to hit protein goals. Someone else warns that any kind of tracking is diet culture in disguise. It's overwhelming. And underneath all of it is a simple truth that no one can market. Your body is not a debate. The beauty of the medication is that it lets you build awareness at your own pace. You don't have to sprint toward perfection. You get to experiment. You get to observe what hunger feels like now, what fullness feels like, how different foods sit with you. You can log those experiences or just mentally note them. It's all feedback. For many of us, structure is not the problem. The pressure around structure is. The expectation that everything must be done flawlessly. But structure, when approached with flexibility, can actually create freedom. It gives you a rhythm to return to when life feels scattered. It helps you translate intention into action. I've met people who track their meals as a mindfulness practice. They write notes about energy, mood, and satisfaction, not calories. They use it as a mirror, not a measurement. And I've met others who track nothing at all, but stay deeply in tune with their bodies. Both approaches work when they come from connection instead of fear. That's what this whole conversation is really about. Connection to your body, your habits, your values. Diet culture severed that connection by convincing us we couldn't be trusted. Anti-diet culture tried to repair it by removing all structure. But what most of us actually need is reconciliation, a way to hold that awareness and self-compassion at the same time. I know some people hear lifestyle change and think it means turning your life into a project again. I get that hesitation. But for me, lifestyle isn't a project. It's an ongoing conversation. It's the way that I check in with myself through different seasons of life. Sometimes that conversation is about protein goals, and sometimes it's about rest. Sometimes it's about journaling through stress before it becomes emotional eating. It's fluid because I'm fluid, and that fluidity is what diet culture could never offer. Diets are rigid by design. They thrive on absolutes. Lifestyle work, the kind we're doing in this community, honors movement. It makes space for learning, relapse, reflection, and reentry. It's not glamorous. It doesn't always trend, but it builds a kind of peace that no challenge or detox can replicate. I think we forget that freedom still requires care. You can be free and still intentional. You can respect the medication for what it gives you and still take ownership of how you use it. The longer I'm on this journey, the more I realize the goal isn't to prove independence from every structure. It's to build a relationship with yourself sturdy enough that structure becomes optional. You can choose it when it helps, you release it when it doesn't. That's agency. Maybe the real shift happening in the GLP-1 space isn't about medication or macros at all. Maybe it's about identity. People are learning that they can take care of themselves without punishing themselves, that they can pursue health without falling back into obsession, that they can hold awareness without anxiety. That's what lifestyle means to me now. It's not the meals or the routines. It's the mindset that allows me to use those things in a way that feels kind. It's the absence of panic. It's the permission to adapt. So when I see creators telling people on GLP-1s to stop tracking, stop planning, stop caring, because that's diet culture, I understand the intention. They're trying to protect people from harm. But healing doesn't come from swinging to the opposite extreme. Healing comes from learning nuance, from trusting yourself enough to know what kind of support you need in each season. If tracking helps you stay mindful, use it. If it overwhelms you, Sit it down. If routines give you peace, keep them. If you need a break from structure, take it. None of that determines your worth or your success. It just reflects where you are in your learning process. This medication can change your appetite, but it's the mindset work that changes your life. And mindset work isn't anti anything, it's just awareness turned inward. In the end, that's what I want for all of us in this space, to build a lifestyle that feels lived in, not performed. A life where structure and softness can coexist, where health feels like support instead of scrutiny. Because when we stop arguing about what counts as diet culture and we start paying attention to what makes us feel grounded, that's when everything begins to make sense. So if this spoke to you, take a moment to think about where you are right now. Maybe you're finding your rhythm again. Maybe you're still figuring out what feels right. Both are okay. If you want more conversations like this, hit subscribe and share this with someone who's learning to build their own kind of peace too. And remember, we can share our journeys, but we should never compare them. Bye.